Welcome to Midnight Casebook, where every shadow hides a secret and every mystery begs to be solved. Tonight, we unravel the chilling tale of Father Brown and She Died After His Sermon, a fan-made story paying homage to the brilliance of G.K. Chesterton's legendary detective. We'd love to have you along for this enigmatic journey. Drop a comment to let us know where you're watching from, share your theories, and if you spot any inconsistencies, don't hesitate to call them out. Your keen eyes and sharp minds help us craft even more captivating mysteries in the future. Chapter 1. A Death in the Pews. The late morning sun broke through a layer of dense fog, casting a muted glow over the quaint village of Kembleford. The sound of church bells echoed through the air, their sonorous tolling melding with the whispers of the townsfolk as they gathered outside St. Mary's Church. Father Brown stood at the pulpit, his voice a gentle assurance amidst the rising murmurs of the congregation. He spoke of faith's strength in adversity, urging his parishioners to seek the divine even in the most desolate times. Little did he know that this very sermon would soon be overshadowed by the chilling sound of dread. As Father Brown passionately delivered his message, a sudden gasp echoed through the nave. It was Mrs. Beatrice Lane, the village's beloved matron, dressed in her Sunday best, a floral gown that flared at the waist. She had been sitting near the front row, her keen scrutiny often serving as an unwritten law of conduct in Kembleford. However, her eyes were now wide, and her lips trembled as she clutched at her throat, her skin turning pallid. Within moments, she collapsed, her body crumpling like a discarded rag doll. A disquieting hush fell over the congregation. Gasps and muted whimpers filled the air as the sound of wood creaking echoed through the church. Fear gripped the hearts of those who witnessed the scene. Father Brown rushed down the aisle, moving swiftly with a composed yet earnest demeanor. He knelt beside Mrs. Lane, his fingers resting lightly on her wrist, searching for signs of life. He felt the faintest of pulses, a flicker of hope amid despair. "She's alive," he announced, his voice steady, though concern seeped into his brow. The parishioners began to murmur in hushed tones, but the whispers were soon laced with suspicion and fear. "Poisoned, perhaps," one man suggested, his voice trembling with the weight of wild conjecture. "Rubbish," shot back Mrs. Hargrove, her voice piercing through the uncertainty. "No one would dare to harm Beatrice. She's the heart of this community." "But the sermon, the message," a young boy whispered, staring wide-eyed at the stained glass depicting angels descending from heaven. It was as if a veil of ominous portent hung over the church, and all present felt its weight. Father Brown raised a hand. "Please, everyone, stay calm." He turned his gaze back to Beatrice, whose pallid complexion begged for answers. The days leading to this Sunday, Beatrice had confided in him about fears for her health. A shadow of suspicion loomed, one that went beyond mere illness. There had been talk among the gossips of the village about an adversary, someone with grievances against her charitable acts. "I need to fetch Dr. Hawkins," someone shouted from the back. The commotion became unbearable, with parishioners darting toward the exit, leaving Father Brown with the ominous feeling that something sinister lay beneath Mrs. Lane's collapse. As a few stayed behind to attend to Beatrice, Father Brown turned back to the congregation, his mind racing. The wording of his sermon replayed in his head, a reference he recalled to a passage in the Bible about betrayal among friends. Could that have resonated with someone present? Suddenly, Abigail, a quiet but observant seamstress in the village, approached him, her face lined with concern. "Father, I saw her just before the service. She seemed different, almost frightened." "Frightened? What do you mean?" he pressed, his intuition swirling with intrigue. "She received a letter that she kept hidden. She wouldn't even share its contents with me, and you know how close we are. Something about it troubled her, but I could never pry it out of her grasp." The church bells tolled again, the ringing echoing like a final warning. A man in the shadows cleared his throat, catching Father Brown's attention. It was Gregory Elmsworth, the local butcher, a man often found on the fringes of parish life, but whose voice now carried a hint of bravado. "Beatrice had her ways, didn't she?" Elmsworth huffed. "Always meddling, always blabbing about what others should do with their lives. Maybe someone thought she deserved a taste of her own medicine, eh?" Father Brown glared at him, sensing the weight of suppressed resentments bubbling beneath the surface. "Words can be as harmful as poison, Mr. Elmsworth." Still kneeling beside Beatrice, Father Brown steeled himself, contemplating the twisted motives concealed within the village's facade of camaraderie. The whispers of suspicion had already begun to swirl through the tight-knit community. Who among them might bear a grudge strong enough to lead to such an outrageous act? Then the sound of footsteps echoed behind him. Dr. Hawkins emerged, a scowl etched on his face, holding a small vial labeled in frail handwriting. "Father, I found this in her personal belongings. It's an herbal tincture, but—" His words hung heavy in the air. "Poison," Father Brown whispered, staring at the vial, its contents almost glowing menacingly in the muted light. Dr. Hawkins nodded, dread pooling in the air between them. Before he could ponder further, a loud crash resounded from outside the church. The doors swung open, revealing a disheveled figure stumbling in. Mr. Jasper Cutler, a recent newcomer to Kembleford, notorious for his gambling debts and strangled ego. His clothes were torn, a frantic glint in his eye. "They killed her! They killed Beatrice!" he shouted, making his way down the aisle, his breaths ragged as he collapsed before the stunned congregation. The room erupted into chaos, disbelief swirling in the confined space. "What do you mean?" Father Brown demanded, his heart racing with the possible truths this stranger could unveil. "There's something sinister afoot. I saw who did it." Cutler's eyes darted around the church, settling on an unmarked face before exhaustion took over. The congregation stood frozen, every heart pounding with tension as Father Brown felt a twist in his gut, for beneath the shadow of the church steeple, an intricate web of deceit loomed, growing tighter even as daylight began to fade. He had taken the first step into a mystery that would expose secrets far darker than he could ever imagine. Chapter 2. A grief-stricken gathering. The pall of grief hung heavily over the church hall, where mourners gathered in hushed tones. The damp chill of autumn seeped through the cracked windows, mingling with the scent of wilting lilies that adorned the makeshift altar. Shadows flickered against the walls, cast by the flickering candles that struggled to cling to life amidst the somber atmosphere. Father Brown stood at the front, observing the congregation with a heavy heart, acutely aware that the tragedy of Mrs. Beatrice Lane's collapse had grown into something far darker. It was amidst this mixture of sorrow and suspicion that a sharp gasp broke through the murmurs. Mrs. Hargrove, tight-lipped and stoic, had brought with her the vibrant gossip of the village. It was she who now clutched her chest, eyes wide and brimming with fear. "Is that an envelope?" she exclaimed, pointing tremulously to a paper that lay abandoned on a nearby table, the sight evoking hushed whispers from the others. Father Brown moved closer, the congregants parting for him like a sea of anxious souls, all eager for answers, yet fearful of the truths that might unwind. The envelope lay there, tattered and ethereal against the rough-hewn wood, bearing Beatrice's scrawled name in a precise hand. He recognized it immediately as her handwriting, yet the ink to which it had been rendered appeared darker than it should have, a striking contrast against the faded paper. "I found it underneath one of the chairs by the pews," Mrs. Hargrove continued, her tone laced with both excitement and unease. "It must have slipped from her hand when she collapsed." With measured deliberation, Father Brown picked up the envelope. Its edges were frayed, a testament to some frantic opening, not so unlike the spurious thrill of a child tearing into wrapping, only to find something they never wished to possess. "What does it say?" Abigail, the seamstress, appeared beside him, her fingers gnawing at the end of her handkerchief. Was there something important in it? Father Brown shook his head, the blank silence of the hall deepening as he broke the seal. The contents were sparse, a single sheet with frantic scrawl, the words barely legible through Beatrice's anxiety. A shudder passed through him as he read the brief note, which hinted at deeper troubles, a warning from an undisclosed sender about a betrayal close at hand, referencing those who would see her fail. Father Brown's brow furrowed at the implications. "Betrayal is a loaded word," he mused aloud, each syllable reverberating within the echoing hall. But who would wish harm upon Beatrice, and why? Old grievances simmered like an unturned pot, bubbling away beneath convivial facades. He scanned the crowd, observing the twitch of brows and the tightening of jaws. Mr. Elmsworth loomed at the edge, a figure of questionable loyalty, surely aware of party lines, while the widow Hargrove stood by, guilt-tinged remorse coloring her gaze. "Now, what do you suppose it means?" Abigail pressed, her voice a whisper among the scattered emotions. Father Brown turned the note over in his hands, studying the ink blots. He knew this secrecy would not relent without inquiry. "There's a link shaped by words, passed quietly between familiar faces. Missed turns in the night of trust," he noted, allowing a moment of reflective silence to settle upon the hall. "But if we are to seek the truth, I must dare to speak with all gathered." He moved towards the front, raising his voice to capture the attention of the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, we gather here today in grief not merely for our beloved Mrs. Lane, but also to seek clarity in the shadows that lurch amid our sorrow. Secrets often breed in darkness, friends, and Beatrice's last days appear thickened with a dread that reaches beyond mere ailment." A murmur ran through the hall, suppressed whispers rising like the damp smoke of a dying flame. Father Brown's right. Mr. Elmsworth carped from the back, his bravado frayed. It wasn't enough that Beatrice had her nose in everyone's business. Someone must have had enough of her meddling. Father Brown stood firm against the bubbling animosity, his gaze piercing through the veils of deflection. "You seem agitated, Mr. Elmsworth. Do you harbor a grudge against Beatrice?" His voice, calm but gathering emotional weight, met Elmsworth's rage with careful balance. "Perhaps it is easier to lash out," he began, but Elmsworth interrupted. "Jealousy? No. It is the burden she placed, her constant nagging, her need to control everyone's lives." His ire spilled into the hall, hysteria edging his voice. The shadows stirred, and whispers of agreement wafted softly, like restless leaves. In the growing tension, Abigail focused with keen regard upon the envelope now resting in Father Brown's hand. But what if it was something more? Her eyes darted to Cutler, who had sunk too low upon a nearby bench, bereft and restless. The newcomer kept to himself but spoke often of past tethers. What do we really know of him? Father Brown regarded Cutler, whose pallor reflected the glint of guilt wrapped tightly within his own conscience. Mr. Cutler, you seemed rather adamant about Beatrice's demise earlier. If you possess insights steeped in knowledge, I suggest you share them now. Why should I? It's none of my business, Cutler replied, a defensive edge loud in his voice, his brow furrowed and dampened by sudden anxiety. Perhaps Father Brown's tone dropped dramatically, laced with seriousness, but such notions of darkness inhabit every corner. His words must come forth, for they may illuminate unknowns. Suddenly, a commotion erupted from the hall's entrance. The door swung open, unveiling a new figure, a woman cloaked in patient resolve, breathlessly collecting herself amid the startled onlookers. "Is it true?" she implored, eyes darting between faces. "Is Beatrice—" Her voice faltered, leaving behind an unuttered question of life or death. Father Brown felt a pressure tighten around him, his mind already racing as he gestured for her to speak. The room buzzed with tension, nameless dread lifting its shadowy veil. "I am her sister, Margaret Lane," she declared, her presence heavier than the truth hanging just moments away. "And I have come to unearth secrets long buried." Her voice quavered, poised to plunge the congregation deeper into the recesses of mystery, where confessions lingered and unbridled motives awaited revelation. As suspicion crackled like dry wood, Father Brown could almost taste the unfolding tension, brewing a storm destined to echo deeply in the heart of Kembleford. The next syllable pressed against his lips could unravel it all, but a sudden glance toward the envelope flickered through his mind, a cruel weapon cloaked in familiarity, weighty with secrets yet to unfurl. Was it coincidence, or was it fate that had brought them all here? Father Brown plunged into the silence, consumed by the gathering darkness and the specter of betrayal looming just beyond the periphery of their unsuspecting lives. Chapter 3. The Locked Church Mystery. The morning mist hung thick over Kembleford, casting an ethereal gloom around the village that clung to the cobblestone streets like a suffocating veil. Father Brown stepped lightly onto the path leading to St. Mary's Church, his heart heavy with the shadows of yesterday's tragedy. The reverberations of Beatrice Lane's untimely collapse still echoed in his mind, a haunting reminder of the mystery woven tight within the tapestry of village life. As he approached the church, a sudden chill surged through him. An early omen, perhaps. The heavy oak door, usually a portal to solace, stood ominously ajar, creaking slightly with the restless breeze. He stepped inside, but was immediately struck by an unsettling sight. The church's pews gathered unnaturally close, as though retreating from a presence that had spooked them. Sunlight filtered inadequately through the stained glass, dappling the floor in muted colors, yet all felt wrong, too quiet, too expectant. "Father Brown." The call came from the rear of the church, where Dr. Hawkins waited, a nervous energy thrumming in his voice. He approached, visibly shaken, his brow deeply furrowed. "You must see this." Father Brown's eyes darted towards the altar, where a splatter of dark liquid marred the polished wood, an absent dignity marking the holy ground. "Is it?" he began, apprehension thickening his throat. "I fear so," Dr. Hawkins replied, kneeling beside the uneasy testament. The scent of something acrid hung in the air, mingling with the faint aroma of candle wax. It could be tied to Beatrice's— He hesitated, as though the word death might compound the tragedy. Her collapse, yesterday. Father Brown regarded the smudge closer, his mind racing back to the herbal tincture found among Beatrice's belongings. He possessed a shrewd understanding of substances and their tendencies. This was no mere spill. The hue, nearly black, raised concerns of foul play. "We must determine what has happened here," Father Brown replied, resolve steeling his voice. He glanced back at the entrance, where footsteps had sounded. "Was anyone else here?" "Only Mr. Elmsworth. He darted out just after I arrived, claiming he heard a disturbance," Dr. Hawkins replied, gesturing toward the darkened corner of the church. "But the door was locked when I came in. I had to pry it open myself." Father Brown's gaze sharpened, a sharp intuition nagging at him. "Locked, you say? Certainly a curious detail. If Beatrice was indeed poisoned, how could she have collapsed alone, within a locked church?" His mind cascaded through possibilities. The congregation should have been notified, gathered to lend prayers, or, in light of current events, to gossip, actions highlighting their intertwined lives. Could it have been someone from outside? Hawkins suggested, the hint of paranoia threading through his voice. But none could enter without a key. Indeed, Father Brown mused, knitting his brows in concentration. The congregation's relationships were a tapestry intricately woven with trust and betrayal, yet something still felt amiss. "Did you notice who else was missing yesterday beyond Mr. Elmsworth?" "Margaret Lane," Hawkins offered, the weight of her sister's absence punctuating his words. "She appeared frantic, and then it fled our thoughts as we focused on Beatrice." Father Brown pondered the implications. Margaret's frantic arrival had felt like a tempest, brushing the surface of calm waters. Concealed motivations percolated through the family tree. If Beatrice had written of betrayal in her final note, perhaps she had been onto something, her words foreshadowing shadows lurking beneath the surface of sisterly bonds. Suddenly, their thoughts turned with the clanging of church bells, each toll a reminder of time passing too swiftly. The congregation would soon seek answers, mounting inquiries to be hurled at them like stones. "Let us venture outside. But first—" Father Brown knelt to further inspect the dark splotch on the altar, noting an unusual glimmer at its edge. "A fragment," he murmured, carefully lifting the object with a handkerchief, revealing a tiny copper coin, its surface etched with a figure. The image of a woman. Beatrice, perhaps, uncanny in its detail, and shimmering even in decay. Hawkins watched with bated breath. "What does this signify?" "A token of sorts," Father Brown speculated. Was she seeking some ancient remedy, or could it belong to a familiar hand? The implications of the coin spun through his thoughts. Cash and presents were often intertwined with motives for love, jealousy, greed. We must consider to whom this is linked. As they stepped back into the pale light, the atmosphere grew heavier, suspicion, a palpable cloud, descending around them. Villagers began to trickle towards the church, anxious hearts carrying whispers of ill tidings. Yet the most disturbing absence weighed upon Father Brown's mind. The ones he had deemed key witnesses appeared miraculously missing. "Father, is it true?" A voice emerged, a familiar form rushing toward them. It was Abigail, the seamstress, her visage marred with distress. "I just passed Margaret. She—" "Margaret?" Father Brown interrupted. "What was she doing?" "She was heading towards the old manor house. There's talk of secrets buried there, Abigail said, dread intertwining with her words. Maybe she knows more than she's let on. Father Brown's gut twisted. The manor, a relic of the past, that harbored more than its share of misdeeds, concealed motives, and dark tales. This could be our lead, he concluded, his thoughts racing ahead of the crowd burgeoning into the church. In the distance, the outline of the manor towered against a gathering storm. Secrets scampered amid the twisted tree branches encircling it, tightening the air with stories, untouched by daylight. Together, we must find her, Father Brown stated, resolve setting his features. The coin burned in his pocket, a quiet reminder that something sinister lurked within the heart of Kembleford. As he stepped out into the gathering storm, a shiver of intuition crawled down his spine. The truth was close, but shadows lurked, whispering bitter letters into the dark. The missing witnesses, the locked door, and now Margaret's flight. They blazed trails, connecting back to Beatrice's warning. What cryptic maze implicating loyalties would they uncover next? As thunder rumbled ominously overhead, Father Brown could not shake off the feeling that time was running out. The clock had resounded its tolls, and in that moment, clarity sparked. A dangerous premonition, woven between life and death, hung solely on the precipice of one terrible thread. Chapter 4. A Will Left Unread. The morning sun sliced through the lingering fog like a knife, casting dim light upon the gravestones that stood sentinel in St. Mary's churchyard. Father Brown walked slowly, his footsteps muted by the mossy earth, the weight of his thoughts echoing the chill in the air. He had not expected to return so soon to this place, yet the events of yesterday stirred in his mind, shoulder-deep in shadows, secrets woven across the tangled threads of Kembleford's community. As he turned to leave the graveyard, a familiar figure emerged from the veiled mist. Margaret Lane, her face drawn and pale, ascended the cobblestone path toward him, her sister's shadow still lingering in her gaze. "Father Brown," she called, breath trembling under the weight of unspoken urgency. Her usual composure seemed discarding under the mantle of her recent revelations, each word drawn from a well of mortification. "You must come." Father Brown felt a pang of sympathy for her as she approached, grasping at her coat as if seeking warmth from a thing bereft of comfort. "What troubles you, Margaret? Speak plainly." "It's about Beatrice. There's a document, something hidden." Her eyes widened, panic stirring within. "A will that no one has read." "Are you certain?" Father Brown asked, his instincts sharpening. Had she written a new one? Margaret nodded, her worry cranking tighter. "Our father's estate should have been divided among us, but Beatrice hesitated to enact any changes. Our family disputes have never been small, infighting over the manor, the business. There's bitterness there." "Did she mention this will to you?" "Only once, some time ago," Margaret confessed, panic growing evident in her voice. "I thought it was merely talk until now. It could change everything." As Margaret spoke, Father Brown's mind darted back to the recent events. A family hidden behind locked doors, their loyalties strained. Dread saturated the air with whispers of greed. "Where might you find this new will?" "The old library, over on the estate grounds," she replied. "It is said to hold what few remnants of our family's records still remain." "I see," Father Brown said, determination pooling in his chest. "Let us venture there at once. But beware, Margaret. Knowledge can be as dangerous as it is enlightening." They made their way to the manor, hidden within a cloak of aged oaks, the creaking door whispering ominous secrets as Margaret pushed it ajar. Dust motes swirled, In the dim light, time crystallized in every neglected corner. Shelves lined with forlorn tomes cast shadows that flickered and danced in the lantern's glow. As they crossed into the room, a sour drape of mildew greeted them. Each footfall disturbed the air, emptying the silence with a heavy tension. "Where should we begin?" Father Brown queried, glancing around at the labyrinth of books and cabinets. Margaret frowned, searching the room. Perhaps in the drawers. She might have hidden it there. Just as she approached a battered oak desk, their attention was drawn to an ethereal glimmer inside a drawer, half hidden beneath a stack of faded envelopes. With trembling fingers, Margaret withdrew the object, revealing a brass key, small yet conspicuous. "What is this?" Father Brown asked, taking the key gently between his fingertips. The metal felt warm, as though it had a history of its own. Could it unlock something in the manor? Margaret pondered aloud, a flicker of hope sparking in her eyes. Or it may belong to a place Beatrice kept secret, Father Brown mused, his brow furrowing. In which case, it is worth pursuing further. Just as Margaret appeared ready to respond, the distant echo of footsteps halted her, followed by the sudden creak of the manor's floor. "Who goes there?" Father Brown called, tension rising in the air. The door swung open, revealing Mr. Elmsworth, his expression as stormy as the weather that loomed outside. "What are you doing here?" he snapped, his sharp gaze darting between Father Brown and Margaret, suspicion drawing taut networks across his brow. "Simply seeking answers, Mr. Elmsworth," Father Brown replied evenly, sensing the tension crackle in the air. "You, too, must be interested in discovering the truth behind Beatrice's last possessions." "Truth?" Elmsworth scoffed. "Only trouble lies in those buried secrets," Margaret interjected, desperation dripping from her words. "Perhaps not all secrets should remain buried, Mr. Elmsworth. Our sister's will—" "Stay away from the will," he thundered, stepping closer, expression fierce. "You have no idea what you're meddling with." "Do we not deserve to understand our inheritance?" Margaret retorted, a new resolve shining in her eyes. "Were you not the one who turned against her? Your greed knows no bounds." At this, Elmsworth's face darkened, but Father Brown stepped between them, sensing a conflict that swelled like a storm. "Don't allow fear to spur hasty actions, gentlemen," he cautioned, his voice steady. "Let us approach this in rationality. Secrets hold the keys to truth, and it's often truth that reveals—" Suddenly, the floorboards creaked once more, louder this time, igniting a sensation of claustrophobic urgency. Ignoring the unease swirling among them, Father Brown turned his attention to a bookshelf near the back of the room, a loose tile drawing his eye, not quite aligned with the others. "Margaret, might I suggest examining that section?" As the group approached, Elmsworth's brow furrowed deeper, an unshed emotion flickering across his face. "What are you looking for? More secrets?" "Perhaps," Father Brown muttered, his excitement blending with apprehension. He nudged the loose tile aside, revealing a hollow space behind the shelf. A rusted box lay within, encrusted with dust and age, locked tight, but no less intriguing. "A box?" Margaret queried, awe evident in her voice. "Indeed, and likely worthy of exploration," Father Brown stated, the brass key feeling alive in his palm. He turned it in the lock as each click echoed within the manor's confines, drawing the attention of both Elmsworth and Margaret. And then, with a final snap, the box sprang open, revealing not a will, but a delicate bracelet intertwined with a weathered piece of parchment. Beatrice's handwriting scrawled across the surface. Father Brown held his breath as the unfolding moment hinted at revelations long awaited, yet now completely unshackled. The contents shimmered against the light, but it was the missive that whispered secrets of betrayal and jealousy deep within their family ties. "What has she left us?" Margaret asked, her voice barely above a whisper, pulse quickening. Father Brown gently unfolded the parchment, his heart leaping with anticipation, even as trepidation washed over the three of them. The key they had uncovered might serve a greater purpose than simply unlocking mysteries. It could unveil motives and treachery wrapped within familial love, threatening to engulf them. As the words began to reveal themselves, a single thought struck him. This would not be the last of Beatrice's unquiet echoes haunting them. Each inked line promised more than just inheritance, but a tangled web of blame, desire, and perhaps even murder. Yes, time was indeed against them, and within those lines lay the perilous truth, threatening to break the fragile bonds amongst them. The manor creaked ominously around them as shadows flickered and faded, ominous and serene, an unsettling backdrop for revelations to unfold. Father Brown peered closer, steeling himself for the truth that would take them deeper into the enigma of Beatrice Lane's untimely end, knowing full well the storm was just beginning. Chapter 5. Whispers in the Shadows. The muted light of the Golden Oak pub flickered softly as Father Brown pushed through the heavy wooden door, a sudden gust of wind swirling round him, like a whisper from the grave. The familiar scent of ale mingled with the cozy aroma of roasted lamb. But tonight, the warmth of the hearth barely cut through the chill in the air, thick with tension and secrets. Every face in the dimly lit room turned towards him for a moment, before returning to hushed discussions, the lively chatter of the evening reduced to thin trails of muted tones. He sensed it in the air, the tension woven through the conversations, and nerved fingers clutching glasses, all hinting at a more sinister undercurrent. He steered toward the aged bar, where old Tom, the bartender, rubbed his hands together nervously, his brows knit in a tapestry of worry. "Ah, Father Brown, what brings you here so late?" Tom's voice trembled slightly, perhaps from the chill, or perhaps from the unspeakable events that had transpired after Sunday Mass, which still hung over Kembleford like the morning fog. "All this talk of Beatrice and her family has brought me here," Father Brown replied, leaning lightly on the edge of the bar as he observed the thin sheen of sweat on Tom's brow. "I fear there are secrets simmering in this very pub." Tom nodded slowly, his eyes darting to the small gathering at the corner table. "Aye, as true as the day is long, folk don't speak of such things lightly. They're frightened, Father." Father Brown cast a scrutinous gaze toward the table where Abigail, the seamstress, sat nursing a pint beside Mr. Elmsworth, who was conversing with Margaret Lane and her brother, Peter. Each face wore an expression marked by unease, and as the dim candlelight flickered over their features, he noticed the shifting eyes, the nervous exchanges. He knew he must glean what he could before the night was through. "May I join you?" Father Brown inquired, moving closer to the table, and they all looked up, the air thickening with unspoken accusations. "Of course, Father," Margaret said, her voice steadying, despite the tremor in her chin. "You must know what we've been discussing." We've been mulling over the late Beatrice," Elmsworth interjected, his tone sharp, as though he resented the tension hanging between them. "Her will has sparked quite a rivalry within the family, and I suspect it won't end any time soon." "Indeed," Father Brown agreed, observing the nuances of their reactions. Fear often nests in the hearts of those awaiting a will's revelation. But secrets, they can fuel the most heinous wrongdoings. Peter clenched his fists on the table, the wood creaking beneath his grip. We're all well aware what our sister wanted. She kept things to herself far too long. Because of that, many suffer. Or perhaps it's because of her greed that we find ourselves in this morass, Elmsworth replied smoothly, a challenging gleam in his eye. Careful now, Mr. Elmsworth, Father Brown cautioned, sensing the volatile energy blossoming between the two men. Among those who suffer are those with the most to gain. Margaret frowned, glancing from one face to another. What do you imply? A motive, he responded, honing in on their changes in demeanor. Where there is a motive, there may also lie a dark act concealed by silence. Before any further tension could escalate, Abigail interjected with a shaking voice. But who would dare? We're a quaint village, loyal as the summer roses. No one imagines malice among such close-knit souls. Yet here we are, discussing inheritance and broken bonds, Father Brown countered, weighing each word. Then again, even the closest of alliances can hide the deepest treachery. Enough with this conjecture, Father, Peter interrupted, the anger bubbling closer to the surface. You're only stoking flames of paranoia. Paranoia? Perhaps, Father Brown mused, folding his arms, but I have witnessed the darkness inside families before. Besides, Margaret mentioned this hidden will, the very thing that had the potential to shift power profoundly. A taut silence descended as each gaze fell to the wooden table, the lingering air thickening with shadows. It seemed each of them had a stake in the newly unearthed will, but might also be hiding their own secrets. Forgive me for your discomfort, Father Brown continued, unfazed, but such evident tensions are often where the truth resides. Just then, he caught a glimpse of movement across the room. The door swung open reluctantly against the wind, allowing the night air to sweep in with a gust. A figure wrapped in a dark cloak stepped inside, drenching the space with a shroud of mystery. Father Brown straightened, curiosity piqued by the newcomer's presence. "And you are?" he inquired, his voice measured. The cloaked figure hesitated, before lowering the hood to reveal a woman with fiery red hair and hazel eyes. "I am Clara," she introduced herself, her voice laced with an inexplicable urgency. "I come seeking Father Brown." An unsettled silence enveloped them, Clara's demeanor trembling with unvoiced urgency. "I heard stories of Beatrice. She spoke of things no one else should know." "Perhaps you could share those stories with us, Miss Clara," Father Brown invited, an insistent edge to his request. He could sense the gravity of her presence, the trembling fabric of her lacquer-like nerves. Just as she opened her mouth to respond, the distant church bell tolling for the hour echoed ominously, washing over the pub like a spectre of despair. The air thickened around them, clocks ticking louder, shadows pulling tighter, building upon the long unspoken truths. "Listen closely, for there's something I must confess," Clara began, her voice trembling. But before she could unveil her claim, old Tom trundled through the room, panting softly, color drained from his face. "Forgive me, Father. Something dreadful has occurred, outside, near the church." At that, Father Brown's heart plummeted. What trouble brews in the number of past midnight? "We found a body, Father." As the words hung like a noose in the air, a sudden panic erupted from all corners of the pub. Secrets unraveled amidst the chaos, leaving confessions waiting to seep forth like dark threads exposed to the unforgiving light. Father Brown felt an unsettling knot tighten in his stomach. Then, it would seem, the shadows encroaching upon us. Harbor whispers worth heeding. And with that thought, he knew that the true depth of deceit lay waiting in the darkness, and he would soon unfurl every layer of its tangled web, especially as that mysterious figure stood before them, concealing truths his instincts were desperate to unveil. The storm was indeed gathering. Chapter 6. The Vanishing Suspect. The mist hung heavy over Kembleford, swirling like spectral whispers in the early dawn light. Father Brown, dressed in his characteristic brown habit, stood just outside the church, his breath visible in the chilled air. The village lay shrouded in a deceptive calm. The serene beauty of the rolling hills contrasted starkly with the mounting anxiety that had settled since the discovery of Beatrice's body. This morning, however, would soon prove to spiral into chaos. Just as Father Brown contemplated the perplexing riddle of Beatrice's untimely end, a familiar figure emerged from the fog. Old Tom, the bartender, his face pale and drawn. "Father, you must come quickly." Tom's voice quivered, an urgent tremor threading through his words. "Margaret, she's gone." "What do you mean, gone?" Father Brown's brow furrowed with concern, yet mingled with the agitation was an inkling of dread. Margaret Lane had been at the heart of their discussions following the tragic events, and her absence could unhinge the delicate balance of their inquiry. She packed her things in the dead of night and disappeared without a word, Tom gasped, glancing over his shoulder as if fearing her shadow might materialize from the surrounding veil of mist. "I thought you should know, Father. You might want to check her home." Nodding resolutely, Father Brown followed Tom through the village, the cobblestones slick beneath their feet. The quietness now felt suffocating, as if the very air withheld breath. They arrived at the Lane Manor, the windows like unseeing eyes, grim against the encroaching elements. Father Brown knocked sharply on the oak door, the sound echoing with an ominous weight. When there was no reply, he pushed it open, the heavy wood creaking as if resisting the intrusion. Inside, the manor seemed a hollow shell, its once vibrant spirit dimmed. Light filtered through the draped windows, casting ghostly shapes across the plush carpet. But Father Brown's attention quickly shifted to a small table by the door, where an envelope lay, conspicuously out of place. "Tom, quick!" Father Brown beckoned, retrieving the letter and holding it in the distorted light. The handwriting was unmistakably Margaret's, unruly yet elegant. He unfolded it, scanning the hastily scrawled lines. "Forgive me," it began, "but I cannot stay and bear the weight of this horror any longer. Beatrice's death has unmasked the shadows we all hide beneath." He paused, a heavy realization sinking in. We were too quick to judge her. Tom's brow knitted in puzzlement. "What does she mean by that?" Father Brown continued to read, the ink trailing into a dark omen. "I will seek solace elsewhere, far away from the weight of betrayal. You shall learn of my choices in time. Please do not blame yourself." The final words lingered heavily in the air. She has fled, but why run if she was innocent? In that moment, the pieces shifted in Father Brown's mind like a jigsaw, revealing a disconcerting image. Margaret's flight wasn't merely impulsive. It was a calculated escape, perhaps out of guilt, or was it an effort to protect someone else? Margaret was deeply intertwined with her sister's consequences, he murmured, the cogs of deduction spinning. Perhaps she knows something that others do not. An account of betrayal, perhaps, she can't bear. Just then, a shadow darted past the window, and Father Brown turned sharply, heart pounding. "Tom, did you see that?" he asked, pointing toward the movement. I did. It looked like—" "Let's find out," Father Brown interrupted as he raced out the door, Tom following closely behind. Through the shafts of rising dawn, they moved toward the shadow, which had disappeared behind a thicket of old, gnarled trees. Peering cautiously, Father Brown discovered a small path overgrown with thistles and brambles, leading deeper into the woods. "It leads toward the churchyard," he concluded, urgency propelling him forward. The tension in the air thickened around them, charged with a foreboding that demanded they hurry. They reached the churchyard, the gravestones standing sentinel in the morning gloom. "Look," Tom gasped, pointing toward one of the old, weathered slabs. Someone had recently disturbed the earth, fresh soil, almost like a grave half dug. But what lay beneath? Kneeling beside it, Father Brown absent-mindedly brushed his hand across the soft ground, feeling a familiar flutter of purpose mixed with dread. Just then, a glimmer caught his eye, a thin silver chain, glimmering under the damp earth, leading toward the backside of the mausoleum. "Tom, help me," Father Brown urged urgently as they unearthed the chain, intertwined with the remnants of a bracelet once belonging to Beatrice. A shiver coursed through him, for he had been so caught up in the mystery that he had missed the glaring connection. This was likely dragged here by Margaret in panic. Did she bury it to conceal some dark secret? Before Tom could answer, they were interrupted by footfalls behind them. The cloaked figure of Clara, the woman from the pub, emerged from the shadows. "Father Brown," she said breathlessly, "you need to know. I found something last night. A letter, a warning about the Lane family. I planned to tell you, but then I saw Margaret leaving." Father Brown's mind raced with implications, connecting dots furiously. Margaret must have confronted Beatrice and found out something terrible, perhaps about her inheritance, or a betrayal so deep that she felt she could not face the truth. Clara's eyes widened, panic reflecting in her gaze. "But I saw her, Father. She wasn't alone. Peter was with her." As these terrible revelations hung in the air like a dark omen, the fog rolled thicker around them, closing in and obscuring their senses. Father Brown had to piece it together fast. Peter? What if he's the one hiding more than he's revealed? But before he could draw conclusions, Clara added urgently, "Father, there's something worse. If Margaret vanished, it might not be a coincidence at all. Someone is orchestrating this, all connected to Beatrice's death. And if they're willing to make a pair of sisters disappear—" Father Brown straightened abruptly. "Then it cannot end here." The tremor of urgency coursed through his veins. "We must find them, but not before uncovering the truth concealed in this grave matter." With a renewed sense of purpose, he stepped back from the freshly turned earth, aware that the story was far from over. The threads tightened, and it became clear that the edges of their mystery were fraying dangerously close to something sinister. As they left the churchyard, it was with the haunting realization that hidden motives, bonds of betrayal, and a vanishing suspect might be yet more veils over a startling truth. The storm was gathering, but Father Brown knew the tempest would inevitably spill forth. Chapter 7. Unveiling Hidden Letters. A sharp gust of wind howled through the overgrown hedges bordering Kembleford, whipping up tendrils of mist as Father Brown paced before the Lane Manor, his thoughts racing alongside the turbulent weather. The sun was just a distant thought behind accumulating clouds, casting a dull light over the tumultuous events that had unfolded since Margaret Lane's escape and Beatrice's murder. He stood just inside the manor's gate, the heavy oak door still ominously ajar, a silent invitation, or perhaps a warning. As he stepped inside, the oppressive stillness echoed through the great hall, amplifying the apprehension thrumming in his chest. Dust motes danced lazily in the faint rays of light filtering through the grimy windows, where sorrowful portraits watched like solemn guardians. Shifting his weight uneasily, Father Brown's eyes were drawn to a corner table draped in shadows, where an envelope lay partially hidden under a tattered cloth. A flicker of instinct sparked within him. He approached cautiously, kneeling to retrieve it with hands that trembled from a mix of anticipation and dread. The envelope bore no address, only Margaret's unmistakable scrawl, hurried yet elegant. His brown eyes focused intently as he broke the seal. Inside, a folded letter unfurled, revealing Margaret's eloquent handwriting, scrawled upon parchment that seemed to yearn for the light of day, once more released from its confinement. "Forgive me for following my heart instead of the path set before me," it began, twisting the knife of suspicion deeper into Father Brown's gut. His breath caught as he read on, unraveling her thoughts that leapt through anguish like wild horses. Margaret detailed clandestine meetings, something held close, like a well-guarded secret. "I spoke with Beatrice so many times," she confessed. "She feared she was being followed. I cannot trust even my own heart, Father." Her words hung heavy in the air, revealing a world of mixed emotions, love, and desperation. As he delved deeper, a name sprung to life. Samuel Granger, the wealthy landowner who had once set his eyes on Beatrice. "His advances felt suffocating," Margaret wrote, "until our conversations turned to confessions of fear." Father Brown paused, memories flooding back. Samuel was charming, but possessed an intensity that bordered on obsession. If Margaret knew of Beatrice's interactions with him, it could weave a fateful thread through the labyrinth of their tragedy. "Tom," he called, leaning back as the letter slipped from his grip, a thousand thoughts colliding in his mind. The bartender hurried into the hall, his brow furrowed with unease. "What is it, Father?" "I need you to fetch Samuel Granger," Father Brown instructed, his tone firm but urgent. "He must clarify these meetings," Margaret hinted at, "what he knows about the shadows that lingered over Beatrice. Part of this puzzle lies with him." Tom nodded quickly. "Aye, Father. Shall I leave now?" "Immediately. And have care. There are dark threads weaving through this fabric that could ensnare us all." As Tom scurried away, Father Brown returned to the letter, illuminating its significance. For in those words lay the unfolding heart of a mystery, a dance of fear and betrayal, secrecy woven into the lines like a silken veil. But he sensed there was more, clues still veiled in ambiguity. Suddenly, a faint creaking interrupted his thoughts. He turned, feeling the bristling tension of uncertainty creep upon him. The door to the drawing room had swung open slightly, as if beckoning him forward. Compelled by his instinct, Father Brown tiptoed towards it, heart racing, hands clenched against his robe. The sun had retreated completely behind the clouds, plunging the drawing room into suffocating shadows. Father Brown's eyes adjusted, scanning the surface. The room was elegantly furnished, yet the dust settled on the delicate porcelain figures, whispered of neglect. As he stepped further inside, an undeniable energy tugged at him, the lingering trace of something amiss. Then his gaze fell upon a small, darkened cabinet sitting by the window. He approached cautiously, sensing an illicit thrill similar to uncovering buried treasure. With a gentle tug, he opened it to reveal an assortment of documents and letters, all dressed in the delicate texture of time. The first few pages yielded nothing remarkable, but as he sifted deeper, his fingers brushed against another envelope, half shrouded in a small leather fragment. It bore Samuel's name. With sharp focus, Father Brown eased it out, eager to decipher its contents. Yet the moment he unfolded it, a sudden sense of dread washed over him. It was a letter from Beatrice, written some nights before her death, a confession spun from a soul riddled with desperation. "I fear for my life," it began, the ink slightly smudged, as if hastily penned by trembling hands. "Meet me at the old oak in the churchyard. I have something to tell you about Margaret and the shadows that stalk us, for they are not who they seem." The weight of those words echoed through the drawing-room like a haunting refrain. Father Brown's heart quickened. What had Beatrice discovered that prompted such urgent, frightened prose? The oak in the churchyard, the very place where his own journey began to spiral into chaos. He shoved the letter into his pocket, the urgency mounting like a tempest. Clara's warnings emerged in flashes alongside this new revelation. Betrayal, desperate confessions, and the unseen enemy closing in dangerously tight around them. Just then, the creaking of floorboards heralded a disruption. Father Brown turned sharply to see Clara standing in the threshold, fear etched across her face. "Father Brown," she gasped, gripping the doorframe. "You have to come quickly. Peter has returned, and he's been looking for you." The storm thrashed outside, an echo to his mounting concerns. A confrontation loomed, fraught with unanswered questions and hidden confessions. The pieces of the puzzle were converging, and the winds howled a foreboding tune. "Then we must go," he declared firmly. "For the truth is not merely hidden, it's burgeoning, desperate to emerge from the shadows." As they stepped out into the tempest, Father Brown felt a cascade of urgency and determination. The letter tucked close to his heart was not merely a clue, it was an anchor, pulling him deeper into the swirling depths of human frailty and unseen danger. The tangled web was tightening, each thread leading him closer to a revelation that could either shatter their fragile peace or save them from the looming darkness. Chapter 8. The Confrontation at the Estate. A thin mist clung to the ground as Father Brown approached the imposing facade of Edgeworth Manor, a grand estate that loomed like an ill-boding shadow against the pale, early morning sky. Each step he took echoed with the heavy anticipation of what lay ahead, a confrontation fraught with peril and revelation. He could sense the atmosphere thickening, the air infused with secrets buried deep in the manicured gardens and stately rooms. The clock tower on the west wing chimed mournfully, reminding him that time was running out. As Father Brown reached the arched doorway, he paused, taking in the manicured hedges that framed the manicured paths leading to scattered flower beds. But it was not the beauty of the estate that captured him. It was the unease trickling down his spine. He was here, not merely to gather information, but to peel back the layers of deceit surrounding the Lane family and their tragic plight. The door creaked open, revealing Clara, her face paler than the morning mist ever could. "Father," she whispered, casting a nervous glance over her shoulder. "They're all inside. You should be cautious." "Caution has never been my ally, but I will heed your warning," Father Brown replied softly, sensing her growing anxieties. As they crossed the threshold into the drawing room, Father Brown was struck by the archaic grandeur of the estate. Plush velvet drapes, portraits of stern ancestors, and rich wooden furniture that bore the marks of time. A fire crackled in the hearth, filling the room with a wavering warmth, but the atmosphere was far from inviting. The members of the Lane family sat, each seemingly entangled in their own web of thoughts. Peter's eyes narrowed upon their entrance, a flicker of suspicion crossing his handsome features. "Father," he acknowledged curtly, his tone laced with contempt, "I didn't expect you to intrude upon us during this delicate time." "Delicacy is the last thing on my mind, Peter," Father Brown responded, his voice calm yet unwavering. He sensed the bitter tension weaving itself through the air. "What I seek is the truth that has eluded us all." Margaret Lane sat stiffly beside her brother, her gaze flickering between the vicar and her family. "You are not prepared for the truths that may follow," she replied softly, her voice carrying a note of defiance. "It would be better for everyone if you left it buried." "Do you think truth can be buried like a body? Assure you, it festers until it is unearthed." Father Brown's sharp gaze settled upon Samuel Granger, who was perched at the edge of the sofa, tension radiating from his clenched fists. "Samuel, you knew Beatrice well. She confided in you. What did she fear?" Samuel drew a deep breath. His eyes darkened with a mixture of sorrow and something unnameable. "She was afraid of losing herself, of being hunted. There were whispers, Father Brown. Whispers about Margaret, about her relationship with someone she should not trust." "Who?" Nerves jangled across the room as Clara stepped closer to Father Brown, the gravitational pull of the gathering suspicions weaving tighter. "I refuse to believe it." Margaret's voice faltered, betraying the inner tumult. "Why would I betray my own sister?" "Trust is a fragile thing, dear sister," Peter interjected, his tone sharp and accusatory, especially when it is shrouded in darkness. Before Father Brown could respond, Clara stepped in, her voice urgent. "You're mistaken, Peter. The shadows are not where you think. Father, tell them. Tell them what you found." Father Brown's heart raced as he retrieved Beatrice's letter from his pocket, his fingers trembling with anticipation. "I found this in the drawing room," he said, unfolding the delicate parchment, its ink still fresh with desperation. "It bears Beatrice's confession, a plea for help, delivered only moments before her demise." As he began to read aloud, the tension in the room grew palpable. "I fear for my life," he recited, the words echoing with an ominous weight. "Meet me at the old oak in the churchyard. I have something to tell you, about Margaret and the shadows that stalk us, for they are not who they seem." "You see," Margaret exclaimed, her voice rising, confusion and fear spilling forth. "This is absurd. I loved Beatrice. I was never a danger to her." "But what if you were?" Father Brown countered, turning toward her with intensity. "Your love cloaked jealousy. Samuel confided in Beatrice about you. You were in over your head long before she met her end. What do you stand to gain?" "No," Samuel shouted, standing abruptly, face pale. "You cannot accuse her without proof. You have no idea what you're prattling about. I only speak what shadows whisper." Father Brown fixed Samuel with a piercing gaze. "What is it you stand to lose if the truth comes to light? Your affection? Your reputation? Perhaps there is more than familial loyalty at play." Amidst the rising din of voices, Clara suddenly paled, a realization dawning upon her features. "Father," she admonished, "what if it wasn't Margaret at all? What if Beatrice's confession points to someone far worse?" It was a diversion, but Father Brown could see the flicker of recognition in Clara's eyes. He pressed on, fueling the embers of suspicion. "Then speak, Clara. Who else was in the shadows?" Just then, a quick knock resounded through the hall, and they all turned. Breathless, the door swung open, revealing a figure they least expected. Detective Inspector Brisket, disheveled and grim. "Pardon my intrusion, but there's been another incident. A body has been found in the churchyard." As the words settled like a stone among them, a chilling realization rippled through the room. Their tangled web of deception had ensnared yet another victim, and the revelations of that letter had only just begun to unfold. In the depths of their fears, they were all implicated, caught in the relentless gears of a mystery that clenched tighter with every revelation. Father Brown felt the melancholy weight of impending doom as the clocks ticking echoed dreadfully in their minds. The game was on, but where the truth would lead them was yet another haunting unknown. Chapter 9. The trap is set. A faint chill lingered in the air as dawn broke over the quiet village of Kembleford. The morning fog woven into the tapestry of the waking world. Father Brown, clad in his somber clerical attire, moved swiftly through the misty churchyard, the gravel crunching beneath his feet like the whispers of hidden woes. Yesterday's revelations had settled heavily upon him, embers of doubt and dread burning in his mind. This morning, only one thought occupied him. It was time to draw the noose tighter around the truth. In the shadows of the old oak, where Beatrice had written her final plea, Father Brown discovered a furrowed path in the grass, slightly disturbed, as if someone had hurried through the undergrowth. It might seem an innocuous observation to an untrained eye, but to him it was an exquisite thread leading deeper into the tangled web. Kneeling beside the grove, he examined the discolored leaves smeared with mud, the imprint of a boot. Working class, perhaps, the treading worn down, bore the heavy weight of someone desperate to keep secrets. Clara's warning echoed in his thoughts, punctuated by his own burgeoning suspicions regarding the Lane family. With a spark of ingenuity, Father Brown realized that a trap was indeed the best way to unveil the hidden predator lurking among them. He would bait his quarry by making them believe they were in control, when in fact it would be him pulling the strings. Arriving back at the estate, Father Brown found Peter Lane pacing restlessly in the drawing room. The fire flickered with sinister shadows, casting a golden glow upon the family portrait, a tableau of smiles hiding countless truths. "You've returned," Peter said, a hint of anxiety sharpening his tone. "What have you discovered?" "Only that the more we seek to bury, the harder the truth fights to surface," Father Brown replied, his gaze steady. He gestured for Peter to follow him down the corridor, where the thick velvet curtains swayed slightly with the draught. "I believe we share a common interest in Beatrice's letter," he continued, "though it would seem others are far less inclined to be honest." Peter frowned, his brow knitting in turmoil. "More innuendo, Father?" "No innuendo, Peter." Evidence. Father Brown paused, feeling the tension fizzing in the air like the static before a storm. "There's a plot afoot, a dangerous conspiracy, if you will. It would be wise to explore the motivations of all involved, especially your dear sister Margaret. She seems to possess fervent emotions, yet what if those feelings mask something darker?" "You would accuse my sister of complicity?" Peter snapped, his voice rising. "She loved Beatrice, and you cannot sweeten your words with this nonsense. What could she possibly gain?" Father Brown regarded him carefully, gauging the young man's rising ire. "Jealousy may serve as a bitter foundation for love, Should we delve deeper into the motives of suspicion? I suggest a gathering, discuss our findings openly. It may be a dangerous pursuit, but one worthy of yielding clarity. The challenge hung heavily in the air, reminiscent of an agreeable storm waiting to break at any moment. Later that afternoon, Father Brown summoned Clara, Samuel, Margaret, and Peter to the drawing room, the family portraits overseeing their every move with disapproving eyes. As the members of the Lane family took their seats, the tension in the room was tangible. The fire crackled with the irregularity of nervous hearts, its warmth contrasting with the cold, gathering dread. "Thank you for coming," Father Brown began, leaning against the mantelpiece, his figure silhouetted against the flickering flames. "Let us dispense with the formalities," Samuel interjected, struggling against the weight of his own emotions. "What is it you want, Father?" "I want the truth, Samuel," he replied, his voice echoing with unwavering clarity. "It may well be unwise to ignore the letters, the shadowy figures of our past. One piece of evidence tends to illuminate another, and today I shall lay the foundations of a revelation." Peter clenched his fists at his sides. Margaret's gaze darted among the faces, confusion and fear tracing patterns on her pale countenance. "What are you planning?" she asked, her voice calm yet tremulous like a bird anticipating the hunter's shot. "The disharmony shall serve as bait," Father Brown articulated. He gestured to the family. "In our deepest fears and insecurities, we find a treasure trove of revelation. Each of you bears shadows of both guilt and desire. I will position this debate as if all are equal players in a game of consequence. Through our arranged confrontation, we can unearth the truth about Beatrice's tragic death. For I can sense the murderer among us." Murmurs raced through the room like wildfire. The emotional battleground intensified with each whispered question and fleeting side glance. Clara steeled herself, stepping forward. "Father, it's risky. None of us can be sure how this will pan out." "A risk worth taking, Clara, cognizant of the endgame," Father Brown asserted, his voice authoritative yet suffused with calm. "I must ask for your collaboration. Each of you must invite the darkest of hidden truths to the forefront. The unresolved matters surrounding Beatrice's death must be addressed directly." As the discussions began to spiral, voices clashing in reputations and anxieties, Father Brown observed, carefully, the minutiae of body language revealing far more than words ever could. Just then, shocking clarity struck. He recalled the imprint of the boot he had found earlier and how the family would naturally possess differing footwear predilections. But someone would be wearing an unfamiliar boot, a worker's boot, something that would tie them all together. "I must speak," Peter interrupted, his voice breaking through the din. "This is about more than Beatrice. And then it happened. The door burst open, and Detective Inspector Brisket stepped in, his face an ashen canvas reflecting the weight of news unspoken. "Apologies for the interruption," he said hurriedly, his eyes scanning the room filled with tension. "But I must know, do any of you recognize this?" He produced a familiar piece of leather, damp and smeared with the dirt of the churchyard, a faint echo of darkness clinging to it. Father Brown's heart raced. The trap had been set, but the resolve of the characters twisting in the unfolding web had only just begun to rise. The revelation was nigh. Each passing second noticeably thickened the air, and through the tension he could see the shadows darting, like among a gathering storm, waiting for the moment of chaos as they confronted desperation embodied. What dark forces lurked among the villagers of Kembleford would soon reveal itself, and Father Brown was determined to uncover the truth, no matter where it led him. Yet even the strongest presages could not foresee how deeply the entwined destinies of fear and avarice were tied. Secrets were no longer shrouded in mist. A confrontation loomed on the horizon, and in that murky twilight, hearts would wager on the revelation of sinister calculations yet to unfold. Chapter 10. Revelation in the Quiet. A cold silence blanketed the drawing room as Detective Inspector Brisket held up the piece of leather, a fragment of something undeniably important. It glimmered sapphic in the dim light, suggesting more than just a recent find. It was a revelation waiting to unravel. Father Brown's eyes narrowed, his heart thundering in his chest. This stained leather was no ordinary remnant. It echoed with unresolved tension, the frayed edges whispering secrets forged in confusion and betrayal. "Does anyone care to explain?" Brisket's voice sliced through the uncomfortable stillness. "This was found at the churchyard, near the body of Thomas Rigby." "Rigby?" Samuel interjected, voice threaded with disbelief. "He had no part in this. He was merely the caretaker. And yet, one has to question how a man without dire enemies found himself beneath the soil he tended," Father Brown murmured, stepping forward to examine it more closely. He caught the faint aroma of tobacco, akin to the scent that lingered around Peter Lane in moments of unease. Where do we glean our truths, I wonder? In moments like these, every detail amplifies the silent narrative surrounding us. Margaret, perched restlessly on the edge of her chair, couldn't hold her composure. "Father, what are you suggesting? That we play this somber game while a murderer walks among us? Surely you cannot believe—" "I believe our fears breathe life into shadows," Father Brown shot back gently, fingers tracing the damp leather. "This fragment speaks not only of loss, but of the entangled web of those linked by blood and consequence." Peter's brow knitted tighter, his eyes darting between Brisket and the leather, lip quivering. "You think I had something to do with Rigby's death? I didn't even know him well." "Yet," Clara interjected, confidence dawning, "you had ample motive to suppress truths regarding Beatrice. That relationship twisted all of you into a game none wished to play." She addressed her brothers, her voice rising slightly. "This didn't begin with Beatrice. It was a string unraveling long before. I think you all knew it down to your bones." "What on earth are you getting at, Clara?" Samuel muttered, frustration bleeding into confusion. "If there was something unfamiliar at play, wouldn't we have been aware?" "No," Clara said quietly, but emphatically. "Not until it was too late." Father Brown observed them all, their shifting expressions now crackling like the flames licking at the logs in the fireplace. The tension escalated, each family member's hidden motives surfacing like insidious phantoms, dying to break free from their imprisonment in the dark corners of their guilt. Yet it was not purely suspicion. Fear simmered beneath the surface, and Father Brown could sense it. The truth emanated from each corner of the room, thick enough to choke the air. "Perhaps we should revisit our observations," Father Brown suggested, voice steadying as he directed their attention. "Clara, you brought up Rigby. He worked closely with all of you. Did he ever mention anything that seemed out of place? Had he shared any untoward secrets about Beatrice? He was not merely a student of the land, but a well of knowledge." Peter shook his head vehemently. "Nothing. We scarcely spoke. He had little interest in anything but keeping the grounds tidy. What could he have possibly known? Or what had he found?" Father Brown pressed, his brow furrowing with the implications. Sometimes a man's silence speaks volumes more than his words. We are led away by misguided assumptions when the truth lies grimly beneath. A chorus of murmurs washed over the room, ideas racing furiously through their heads like phantoms on a winter's night. Yet, amidst their stammering uncertainties, one thread began to unfurl itself. Did anyone think to inquire about Rigby's final hours, where he wandered in those troubling days? Brisket asked, voice thick with impatience. Even an unseen presence could yield a stain on truth. Truth? Margaret echoed incredulously. If we are to speak of truth, then what's left of us is muddied and muddled, words lost amidst the shadows of our preferences and desires. Exactly, Father Brown replied, a sudden spark illuminating his features. We chase the filaments that conceal the heart of the matter. We need to trace Rigby's last steps. He must have been privy to something that tied him closely to Beatrice and the motivations each one of you may bear. Clara's light dawned once more with a persistent whisper. He frequented the Oaken Vine Tavern, didn't he? Perhaps there he— Yes, you're on the right track, Brisket interrupted with new vigor. If we know how far Rigby drifted into dubious alliances, we can unravel what most pressed him to keep Beatrice's concerns unaddressed. Precisely so, Father Brown urged. The tavern may be dark, but within its shadows all manner of secrets dance. One confession, no matter how small, could tip the balance of this enigmatic affair. Margaret's face twisted in an anguished surge of doubt, her hands trembling slightly as she interjected, "Be careful, Father. The intoxication of truth can lead even the most honest to desperate lengths." Before Father Brown could respond, the thudding of hurried footsteps echoed from the corridor. In that singular moment, the heavy door swung open for a second time, revealing a shadowy figure which turned into a familiar face, the nervous widow Tilly Frey. "Forgive my intrusion," she breathed, panic tightening her voice. "But you must know, someone has been asking questions, someone who—" "Who what, Mrs. Frey?" summoned Father Brown, eyes twinkling with urgency. "Someone who seeks to bury the past too deep, Father," she gasped. "They've uncovered what was never meant to see the light." As the weight of her words hung delicately in the air, silence enveloped the room like a shroud. Father Brown felt it. Then an invisible tether, binding the corners of the mystery together. The pieces were sealing in upon him, strange and unfamiliar. "Of what past do you speak?" he pressed, his voice dropping to a hushed tone as the others instinctively leaned closer. Their breath mingled amidst fear and anxiety, an orchestra leading them to an uncharted climax. "Of Rigby's death," Tilly whispered, eyes darting with anxiety, "and much more." The final pieces began to converge, with shadows looming larger against the horizon of revelation. Father Brown sensed a crucial fragment lingering ahead, one that pierced right to the heart of buried deception in Kembleford, and with it came the chilling realization that the truth was much more dangerous than anticipated. A confrontation awaited, but whose sins would emerge into the light, and what price would they all pay? Every heartbeat drummed with impending tragedy. There existed uncertainty, but above all, an unyielding thread whispered of untold secrets as they stood on the cusp of revelation. The quiet moments frayed dangerously close to the edge, awakening a sleeping beast, foreshadowing catastrophe amidst truth itself. Chapter 11. The Confession Among Us. The rain fell softly against the leaded glass windows of the manor, each drop whispering secrets to those within. As Father Brown stood in the drawing room, the tension was palpable, a thick fog choking the air, much like the mist outside. Tilly Frey's disquieting words echoed in his mind. Someone had been asking questions, someone intent on dredging up what had been buried deep in the shadows of Kembleford. The time for half-truths had passed. It was now a moment for revelation. "Who seeks to bury the past too deep?" Father Brown inquired, his voice calm but serious. The fire flickered, casting dancing shadows over the troubled faces around him as they leaned in, hungry for answers but wary of the dark spectre they faced. Tilly clasped her hands tightly, trembling slightly. "There are stories about Thomas Rigby, secrets he took with him to the grave, but recent inquiries have unearthed something else, something dangerous." A stiff silence enveloped the room. Father Brown caught Margaret's eye. She sat stiff as a statue, her earlier uncertainty replacing itself with a sudden resolve. "Is that why we speak of Rigby's last days? Because those who once had silenced him now wish for him to remain that way?" Her voice was steady, yet it trembled beneath the tension. "Precisely," Father Brown replied, his gaze sweeping across the group. "But silence often holds more certainty than words ever could. We need each of you to confront your past, to untangle the loyalties that have woven this web of deceit and perhaps even self-preservation." Samuel shifted nervously, the weight of his hidden motives weighing heavy on his shoulders. "This is absurd, Father Brown. Rigby was one of us. Why would any of us have wanted him dead?" Father Brown stepped forward, sharp observation behind soft eyes. "That is precisely what we must determine. There is a truth to be made clear, a confession waiting among you, perhaps even driven by desperation." As murmurs erupted anew, Peter shifted uneasily. "I'll confess to you, Father. I didn't know Rigby well, but I heard whispers. They said he was digging too deep into something involving Beatrice. Perhaps it's time we address the real elephant in the room. Conflicts, perhaps even dues, that were never balanced in the lives of souls intertwined with Beatrice's." "And what dark fissures filled you with unease about what you heard, Peter?" "Speak plainly," Clara urged, her tone sharpened with a mix of impatience and fear. "My connection to her—" Peter's voice faltered, the shadows of remembrance washing over him. "I cared for her, like a moth to a candle flame. When she turned away," he paused, swallowing hard, "I couldn't afford my heart's anguish to seep into her world, and I harbored a distrust towards Rigby for spending time with her. A careless rivalry rooted in heartbreak." Father Brown observed him, the flicker of resolve blending uncertainty muddled with regret. Regret can be a powerful motive. When hearts are vulnerable, they often yield disastrous actions. As Clara and Peter's exchange tangled with emotions, Tilly interjected hastily, "But what of the circumstances surrounding Rigby's death? Surely someone among us—" "Enough with the secrets." Margaret's outburst shattered the fragile calm. "We all knew of the undercurrents that swirled around the two of them, be it jealousy, betrayal, or desperation. We must confront what haunts us. Rigby knew something. Maybe he was in possession of truths that could threaten us, and someone decided it was time to silence him." "An accusation, isn't it?" Father Brown pressed, examining her furrowed brow. "But you still leap beyond logic into the realm of impossibility. One can appreciate the weight of loyalties burdened by déjà vu with past grievances, but it is the questions we should ask ourselves that will lead us to the confession we seek." Just then, a loud creak echoed through the manor as the front door swung wide, revealing a figure cloaked in grey, rain-soaked fabric. It was the last person Father Brown expected. "Graham," he exclaimed softly, recognizing the small-town journalist known for his nose for gossip. Even now, with his own shadows trailing him, Graham stepped forward, breathless and wide-eyed. "I've just come from the tavern," he blurted out, eyes darting with unfettered urgency. "There are rumors, Father. They speak of Rigby's involvement in something illicit. Testimonials point toward a connection he may have forged with someone within the estate, someone tethered to Beatrice as well. He was getting closer to something significant, something that could ruin us all." The revelation hung in the air. Father Brown felt the tension thicken, like fog rolling in from the fields beyond. "Speak plainly," Clara implored. Dread coiled tight around her words. "Who?" "I cannot say yet, but I can tell you that who held those truths weren't of pure purpose," Graham articulated, glancing to the shadows of each individual present, the fear palpable amongst them now. "That is not enough, Graham. I need clarity," Father Brown replied insistently, his brow knitted with thought. "Was there a letter, a missive perhaps, a tangible fragment revealing more than mere rumor? Sometimes it is only a sliver, the tiniest clue that can tether us to the truth." At that moment, Clara's face paled, her panic meeting Father Brown's steady gaze. The churchyard, Rigby's last days, must leave a mark, and perhaps there was something left there. A final note, or an unfinished tale intertwined with Beatrice. We must return there. "Yes, to the scene," Father Brown agreed, a sense of urgency piercing through the encroaching clouds. "But everyone must come. Truths hold more weight when woven together with your whispers." As their footsteps hastily quickened towards the door, a prick of hesitation seized Father Brown. A final reflection captured his attention. A subtle stroking of ink upon parchment, a letter slipped into the fray. There must be something more still hidden beneath layers yet unveiled. He turned suddenly, eyes wide. "Who among you turned Rigby away, or worse yet, left him to face his darkest fears alone?" Before anyone could respond, shadows flickered in the doorway. A newcomer appeared, weaponized by intrigue. "I know of Rigby's whispers," a voice hissed, its origins cloaked. "And they may not be the only ones with blood on their hands." Father Brown's heart raced, the fragile facade of innocence threatening to shatter. The secrets of each protagonist twisted tighter around him, like vines constricting courage as they stood on the precipice of their reckoning. The time for reveals was nigh, but who among them would risk everything in this game of ghosts woven within their past? Could every soul bear the weight of truths repressed for too long? The confessions waited among them, perilously close, yet he discerned only one certainty. Not every threat lay behind them, and the night had only begun its chorus of chaos. Chapter 12. The Final Twist of Fate. The fog hung around the village of Kembleford like a spectre, weaving through the cobbled streets and cloaking the manor in an oppressive shroud. Father Brown sensed a shift in the air, a crackling tension that skittered beneath the surface of this quaint English village. As he stepped cautiously through the doorway of the drawing room, the shadows danced awkwardly, betraying the unease of the assembled party. The burst of excitement from their recent revelations had dimmed, only to be replaced by a different kind of anticipation, one laced with fear. "Father," Tilly Frey exclaimed breathlessly, her voice a tremor against the damp chill. "You must see this." She clutched a crumpled envelope, clearly aged, its edges worn and yellowed as if left forgotten in a darkened corner. The flickering candlelight revealed a faint inked address, barely legible. To my dearest Beatrice. Father Brown's curiosity ignited. Where did you find this? In the churchyard, she said, shaking slightly, alongside the grave. I thought it a mere remnant until I noticed the seal, rigid in its somber indifference. Was meant for Rigby. A heavy silence fell upon the room. Every soul leaned closer, ensnared by the weight of hidden histories suddenly untangling before them. Father Brown accepted the letter, his fingers grazing over the parchment as he examined the calligraphy closely. The swirling loops of ink cradled secrets. Which grave did you find it by, Tilly? He inquired, sensing that the name Beatrice held deeper connotations than it revealed. Rigby's father, she answered. It was a chaotic scene by the headstone, and my mind whisked away the urgency as I searched, thinking it may shed light on what happened that night. Father Brown's brow furrowed as he scrutinized each curve and stroke of the handwriting, the flicker of recognition striking deep. The penmanship is familiar, yet it holds more anger than affection. He cast a sidelong glance at Peter, whose unease was palpable. This writing speaks volumes of a heart bruised, perhaps even vengeful. Peter stammered, the color draining from his face. What do you mean, Father? Your connection with Beatrice, everything you've said paints a portrait of rivalry. Father Brown's voice was calm, but firm. Was your rivalry simply born of foolish jealousy, or something more sinister? The tension coiled tighter around the room, and Samuel's voice broke through the moment. You think Peter had a hand in Rigby's murder? He has yet to offer anything more than idle regrets. No, Father Brown interjected quickly, but emotions can twist minds just as fiercely as any weapon. We should not cast accusations lightly. He pivoted, returning to the envelope. We must dive deeper into this correspondence, for hidden within lies the reason behind what befell Rigby. Slowly, he opened the letter, the paper crinkling under careful fingertips. The words tumbled forth. Painful, desperate expressions of longing, but also of betrayal. Father Brown's heart raced as whispers twined through the spectre of words. As he read each line aloud, the others hung on his every word. It speaks of secrets kept in the dark, the gravity of Rigby's investigation into Beatrice's past. There is mention of truths, unforgivable truths. He paused, the realization settling like a dark cloud. That could not merely ruin reputations, but lives. That can't be, Clara interjected, voice trembling. Beatrice had her faults, yes, but she was no monster. Yet you wish to shield her? Tilly asked, the shock replacing her earlier panic with resentment. If nothing else, it appears Rigby may have known more than any of us could ever surmise. He was more entangled in your web, our web, than we cared to admit. Father Brown's eyes narrowed. There's more at play here than we've yet deciphered. Our prior inquiries led us to believe Rigby was on the verge of unveiling shackles long placed upon us, yet this letter breathes a different reality. Hidden responsibilities may yet surface. He rifled through the letter again before setting it aside, but beyond rumors and flimsy motives remains the true architect of Rigby's demise, and I fear we have yet to unveil them. The rumbles of storm clouds echoed outside, intertwining with the crackles of the fire in the hearth, as Father Brown contemplated who had the most to gain from the silence surrounding the past. He rounded on the group. Each of you bore witness to Rigby's unraveling, yet none chose to intervene. Jealousies birthed from unended affections, piled atop unseen baggage, can plunge one into madness. Clara turned pale as realization dawned. We painted a landscape of innocence to shield ourselves. But what if our very hands have nurtured a garden of regret? Father Brown's breath caught as another name suddenly filled the air, unbidden but sincere. Graham, the journalist who lingered dangerously close and gathered threads before severing them for his own gain. We must confront him and unravel this with a tighter purpose. Find the ties that bind his intentions to the grave of truths lost in the wind. Just as Father Brown spoke the final word, the manor door creaked ominously, sending all heads toward the sound. A shadowy figure slipped inside, water dripping from a tattered cloak. It was Graham, a wild look in his eyes. "Father, you must listen. It wasn't just Rigby who was tied to Beatrice. I have found documents." "Documents," Father Brown interrupted, the light of revelation stirring. Graham's urgency rekindled a flurry of anxious hearts. "What you found? Tell us." "I have no time," Graham cried desperately. "Somebody's been watching this whole affair, and they know—" He stopped dead, eyes widening, choking back fear as the candlelight flickered again, casting shadows that danced and lurked. In a deadly hush, Father Brown strained to hear the footsteps of someone, or perhaps something, far closer than the walls ever dared whisper. "Father," Graham breathed, "they're coming for you, for all of us." The ominous warning reverberated through the air, and Father Brown's heart thudded against his chest. The storm outside raged on as the villagers, with their myriad secrets and webs of lies, stood poised on the brink of revelation, all too aware that one masterstroke lay beyond their grasp. The hand of fate tightened around each of them, whispers of a deeper deception, rippling, dangerously close. The final twist awaited, and it would unravel their fragile notions of morality. Heavy tides poised to burst the dam come dawn.